The Attica Prison Riot. 1971. The Attica Correctional Facility is located in western New York State, in the small town of the same name. Built in 1931, it was designed to house dangerous criminals, including murderers, rapists, and bank robbers. By the 1970s, the prison was already notorious for its strict regime and harsh conditions. However, by 1971, the situation had worsened due to systemic overcrowding. Instead of the intended capacity of 1,600 people, it held over 2,200 inmates, 54% of whom were African American, 9% Latino, and the remaining 37% white. Attica's inmates faced constant discrimination. The predominantly white guards treated them with contempt. Inmates endured beatings, strict punishments for minor infractions, and severely limited access to basic needs such as medical care and educational programs. One striking example of injustice was the lack of warm water for showers and hot meals, which was particularly harsh during the cold months. Additionally, rules governing correspondence and visits were extremely strict. Inmates were allowed to see their families no more than once a month, with visits conducted under heavy surveillance. Mail was also heavily censored, limiting communication with loved ones. Tensions began to rise in the spring of 1971, as inmates started holding informal meetings to discuss their rights and demands. They compiled a list of 27 grievances, which included improved sanitary conditions, access to educational and vocational programs, permission for more frequent family visits, fair treatment by the guards,
to apply the New York State minimum wage law to all state institutions. We want to stop to slave labor here. We want to allow all New York State prisoners to be politically active without intimidation or reprisals. We want true religious sanctity. We want to do our own thing in this place. Number 4, in all censorship of newspapers, magazines, letters, and other publications coming from the publishers. 5,
authorities were aware of the growing discontent but ignored the warnings. Shortly before the riot, a guard severely beat an inmate over a minor infraction, which became the final straw. On the 9th of September, 1971, inmates staged a riot, which began in one of the cell blocks. They took about 50 guards hostage, divided the prison into several zones of control, and began regrouping. The leaders of the uprising, including Elliot Barkley and Leroy Dewey, took on the roles of negotiators, compiling lists of demands and organizing meetings. The inmates demonstrated a high level of organization. They implemented strict rules within the seized zones, such as banning violence, particularly against hostages, and requiring participation in negotiation. Their main goal was to draw attention to the appalling conditions and achieve meaningful reform. For 4 days, negotiations with authorities continued. Media representatives and human rights organizations were present at the prison, covering the events. However, New York Governor Nelson Rockefeller refused to meet the inmates' key demands, including amnesty for the participants in the riot. On the 13th of September, authorities decided to storm the prison. Around 1,000 police officers and National Guard members were involved in the operation. They used tear gas and firearms, leading to catastrophic consequences. Most of the hostages were killed by chaotic police gunfire rather than by the inmates. In total, 43 people died during the riot, including 10 guards and 33 inmates. After the raid, the surviving rioters faced brutal reprisals, including beatings and torture. Despite this, the Attica riot became a turning point in the history of the fight for prisoners' rights in the United States. It drew public attention to the problems within the penal system and sparked widespread discussions about the need for reform. The Santa Fe Prison Riot. 1980. The New Mexico State Penitentiary in Santa Fe was built in 1956 to house dangerous criminals, including serial killers, rapists, and members of organized crime groups. By early 1980, however, the facility had become one of the most overcrowded and poorly managed penitentiaries in the United States. At the time of the riot, the prison held 1,157 inmates, despite being designed for only 900. The cells were overcrowded, sanitation conditions were catastrophic, and the staff was underfunded and poorly trained. A major risk factor was the guards' violent treatment of inmates, which included regular beatings and isolation in tiny, poorly ventilated cells. Most of the inmates in Santa Fe were from lower socioeconomic classes. Many were Latino and African American, convicted of crimes such as drug-related offenses, robberies, and violent acts. A significant portion belonged to street gangs, which created constant tensions within the prison. On the 2nd of February, 1980, at 1:40 a.m., a group of inmates attacked guards using improvised weapons. They seized keys and opened cell doors. The uprising spread quickly throughout the prison as inmates took control of most blocks. Their focus turned to Block E-2, where snitches and sex offenders were housed. Prisoners in this block were subjected to horrifying torture. Using tools found in workshops, the rioters tortured their victims with gas cutters, knives, and hammers. Some were burned alive. In total, 33 inmates were killed during the riot, all of whom were prisoners. After 36 hours, authorities regained control of the prison with the help of special forces who used tear gas and heavy weapons. The aftermath of the riot was devastating. The prison facility was severely damaged, and its reconstruction cost millions of dollars. This riot became a symbol of the failures of the U.S. penitentiary system, highlighting the urgent need for better management and oversight of prisons.